What is up, fellas sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with another NBA 2025-2026 season look ahead. We're on to the Phoenix Suns, which means I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by the Timeline Podcast, fellas. We have Mike V Hill. I almost said Sam V Hill. That would have been funny. Mike V Hill at Protected Pick on the socials, spelled exactly as it sounds, and Sam Cooper at, I'm just going to say Scooper Hoops because it sounds cooler. That's also spelled exactly as it sounds. Guys, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. How the heck are you doing?
Happy to be here, man. Happy to be here.
We're doing great. We love doing this every year, Dan, and I don't blame you for mixing up our names because we've been doing this for so long that we've kind of morphed into one single personality at this point that oftentimes people mix us up. So it's all good.
Well, I do have inside knowledge that if I ask you guys about Jonathan Kuminga, that would be a way to detach the personalities
That's true.
one another. So
That's true.
That's very true. I think you would be wasting precious time talking about Jonathan Kuminga this early in the podcast, but we could go there if you want.
You'd separate us as being right, which is me, and being wrong, which is Sam. So I appreciate that.
I was putting together his outline though, and it was a little depressing because I don't have like a ton of a great feel for how this team is going to play, and I also find there's too much like ancillary stuff to talk about. I have to start here though, and I'll throw it to you first, Mike. Before getting into the offseason nitty-gritty, like how are you going to remember this most recent era of Suns basketball, looking basically from them like pivoting away from that core that made the finals to what just happened?
You know, it's a great place to start, and it's kind of funny because I was thinking about this podcast this morning, preparing to come on with you, and thinking back in the years that we've been on this podcast, because we've done this every year with you, basically, I think since the year before Chris Paul was traded for the Suns, if I'm not mistaken. And famously, I was on the podcast with you recording live when the Chris Paul trade happened one year, and we had to stop the podcast and restart and add a Chris Paul section because Chris Paul wasn't on the Suns yet. So if you look back into all of those seasons, there was a season of the young team sort of putting it all together. There was the Chris Paul years. They made it to the NBA Finals. They traded for Kevin Durant. And now we're here. And like, I don't know, like the last few years, 2.5 years really, with Kevin Durant on the team, I would describe as completely miserable and not exciting in any way. And it sort of started with, Matt Ishbia buying the team and Robert Sarver being gone, which was a very exciting moment. Robert Sarver, famously a terrible owner who did not invest in the team at all. Matt Ishbia comes here willing to invest, but the team has gotten worse every year since he's owned the team, and it's hard to look at anything but that. I really just want them to be good again while Devin Booker's in his prime.
I will say Matt Ishbia did have one of the all-time great rebukes of any offseason to where ESPN had the Suns ranked wherever in their, I don't remember what the rankings were. It wasn't the future rankings. It was too early for that. And he responded by saying, well, they had us like as it being a good team last year and we were terrible.
The experts said we'd be good and they were wrong.
Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing. Look, Matt is going to be a loud owner and he's going to embarrass us a lot, but he also gave us $2 hot dogs and free Suns games on network TV, so shout out to him for that.
How many carbon credits did he purchase, though? I think is the real question.
I don't know. That Tyus Jones deal. Okay, let's just take a look at that.
Sam, when you kind of look back on this, like just how the Suns got to this point, do you view any sort of one move or one moment as like the cardinal sin of what happened, or is this just the result of stuff being stockpiled on top of each other and that exacerbates the situation?
Cardinal sin, I'm not sure. I mean, look, I'm tempted to point my finger at the Bradley Beal acquisition, obviously, because I think if there's anything we've all learned from that in particular, it's that you just don't trade for a guy with a no trade clause. You just do not do it unless that guy is whatever their generational equivalent of LeBron James is, right? Like you don't do it. And I will never be in support of anything like that again. But things were already trending downwards with the Kevin Durant trade in the first place. They just simply, and again, it comes down to Matt Ishbia coming in and James Jones did not want to give up the entire farm for Kevin Durant, so to speak, and Ishbia leaned his entire weight on the button and said, "No, we're gonna do it. We're gonna give up Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and 8 first-round picks or 4 first-round picks or whatever."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to dissect even with hindsight, though, because we do understand that, like, while it was fun that the Suns were in the finals, we all had a great time. They were a ticking time bomb. Chris Paul was getting older. DeAndre Ayton was, just largely an auraless, sauceless player who was like, just bound to regress at some point. And so they always had to do something. And that's why, I did not even remotely enjoy the Kevin Durant experience with the Suns, but I understood the temptation that they had to do something. Ultimately, the KD trade was the start of it, and then the Beal trade was the nail in the coffin. They were firmly screwed at that point.
Actually, this is not on the outline. How did you two, I don't know how closely you followed the reaction to Mikal Bridges' extension with the Knicks. Did you guys have any, how did you feel about him getting a $150 million extension based off the player that he is now?
When he was traded off of the Suns for Kevin Durant, the first thing that Devin Booker said about it was he'll be a free agent in 2027. That's what Devin Booker said about Mikal Bridges, implying that he could come back to the Phoenix Suns. And that was actually my first thought about that extension. I was like, well, I guess not. Which, of course, good players never reach free agency anymore. That's just kind of where we're at, with the way the NBA works. But I don't, I think he was pretty good for the Knicks last year. It is sort of the thing when I think about Mikal Bridges and the reaction that he gets from Knicks fans. I think that I understand why Devin Booker wants to stay with one team his entire career, because the team that no team will ever love you like the team that you're drafted to. And because you are compared to what you were traded for on teams that you're on. So Knicks fans, no matter how good he's going to be on that team, they're going to think, what about all those picks that we gave up for him? How good would those mystery box players be? And I think that's kind of the reaction that they're going to get. For the Knicks, keeping that team together in the way that this Eastern Conference is worth it. And, I think even on that huge extension he got, he's still going to be a tradable contract if they do decide to go a different way. I'm happy for him. The only NBA player that follows me on Twitter is Mikal Bridges, so I'm happy for him.
I was surprised. I think Knicks fans were generally positive about it. I was surprised at a lot of the national response because he's currently projected to be the 51st highest paid player in the NBA when that extension kicks in, and I just think that's fine. I wasn't impressed with I wasn't impressed with his defense last year, and if you were but he did turn it on at some point, and also if you were expecting him to ever be a tried and true number 2 option, you were asking him to be something that he's not supposed to be either. So I was just surprised that it seemed like so many people nationally thought it was just bad business. And I was like, I think that's fine. Even if it's not a bargain, it feels like it's fine. I guess we can continue talking about the Suns. Sam, how did you feel about the Kevin Durant trade? And just to be clear, the one where he was sent to the Rockets, not the Suns.
Sure. Yeah. Look, we all wanted a little bit more, but you understand where the market was. I think that was the initial reaction. When I was reading back, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, obviously the pick that became Khaman Maluach. But I think a lot of us were not even Cam Whitmore, not even, Reed Shepherd would have been too much. But I've always, I was like, they don't even play that guy. He doesn't even play. You took him top 5. You have 0 minutes for him, and we can't ask, but no, I understand why the return was what it was. I think the Rockets are going to be just a super interesting team to follow this year, as an aside. And I will sort of be a little bit of a hater for them, definitely. But just mildly, I think they're going to be interesting to watch. I have all of the Suns Rockets games on my calendar circled, where I'm sure we're going to get spanked by 20 plus points every time, but it's going to be a fun time regardless. So Maluach was, I know you have questions about Khaman Maluach, I'm sure coming, later on, but it's almost unfair to him now how much rests on his shoulders in being the centerpiece of that trade return. If, as I don't suspect he can, Jalen Green is not a true number 2. next to Devin Booker. And I think there are other ways that you could hope that if Jalen Green himself is not a number 2, maybe he can play himself into being a trade piece that nets you a true number 2, right? So that might be what they're thinking with Jalen Green. But otherwise, Maluach needs to be on unfortunately a little bit of an accelerated timeline if you're going to make this work while Devin Booker is still a Sun. So I have a lot of faith in Maluach. I know we're going to talk about him later, but also he's like one of the most raw prospects in this draft class. So it's a little tough for him.
Do we think, Mike, that KD knows he's a vibes killer at this point? He has to know people thinks that, but do you think like within?
He absolutely knows. I am not Mike. I am not Mike, but I'm answering for Mike. Kevin Durant knows exactly what people think about him and everything he's ever said.
He's online enough to know
is motivated by his insecurity. It is all motivated by his insecurity.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, I'm wondering if there's like a self-awareness there to where he could admit to himself, like, yeah, I've kind of submarined the culture of like 3 or 4 teams now.
No. I think the thing about KD, and I think this is true, I don't even think he'd be wrong about this, that he would say, is that all his teammates like him. And I think that's true. I think that, regardless of all the places he's gone and how badly it's gone in a bunch of those places, like, I don't think Devin Booker dislikes Kevin Durant in any way. I think they're probably still going to be close friends after this. And for KD, those relationships are probably what matters to him the most. It's not like he can say the same about every coach he's had, because I think he's had 7 or 8 since he's left the Warriors. A coach is fired every year he's on a team, essentially. When he's on that team, but the players themselves seem to like him. So I think he thinks of that as like some sort of saving grace for him, which I think, there's some fairness to that. But overall, I think not just with the actual on-court product, the fan experience got a lot worse too when he was trolling fans online every day, which is his right. Don't get me wrong. He's allowed to do that. But it's like every day you have to see the star player on your team arguing with Suns fans online, even if they are some of the dumber ones. It's a little miserable to watch.
I think that's what was so frustrating for a lot of not just Suns fans, but honestly KD stans too, is that this is a guy who would have maybe for every 10 adoring KD stans who were just begging online for some sort of validation from their demigod or whatever, Kevin Durant would be able to find the one guy, the one person in the atmosphere, the environment who is criticizing him. And then that is always the person that he would quote tweet, you're right. It is absolutely his right to conduct his business on social media as he sees fit. But he made the space a lot more toxic just by focusing on the toxicity. He would seek out the negativity, maybe because he feels it makes him a better player, but that is always the stuff he would choose to highlight. And he simply didn't have to.
I will say in his defense and any NBA player's defense, if I had a following that huge, I would be tempted to search, because I'm just a masochist, so I'd be tempted to search my own name. And I don't know if I could withhold. I don't know how people deal with criticism at that scale or even a slightly smaller scale of it.
I know what I do. I just ignore any of it. Pretend it doesn't exist.
That's a superhuman strength.
Yeah.
Like that's a superhero trait. If you could just ignore it. I do a better job of not responding to it now, but there are absolutely random commenters or people I mentioned. I won't say anything, but they will ruin like a couple hours of my day.
Right.
Yeah, that's why podcasters truly are our strongest soldiers. Hey,
one of them is the coach of the Lakers. I mean, you never know the heights that we could reach.
That's true.
Mike, how did you feel about and I know how you feel, but I'm asking you for the people that don't. How did you feel about the decision to do the buyout and stretch with Bradley Beal?
Bad. I feel badly about that. I don't think that it was a good idea. I understand the benefits to it. I think that there's monetary benefits. I think, ultimately the largest benefit is it saves Matt Ishbia a ton of money, but just ultimately getting them under the second apron is understandable as well. But if there was any other way to do it that they turned down because of the ease of just, waving and stretching him, then it was a mistake. Ultimately, it was a mistake. I understand that sometimes conceptually, like trading guys for less salary is not always possible. It takes other teams to agree to that. So if that was completely unavailable to them, then I understand the idea of getting to this point. But I would have preferred to keep him on the team until he was an expiring contract. I think there was a way out of this KD Bradley Beal mess, which was free agency in 2027, like just having a clean cap sheet outside of Devin Booker's deal that is completely gone. It's just gone. Now every single margin move has to work out in order for the team to be good with Devin Booker on it because of that. Like there was a world where you find a way to do something with cap space in the future. And I'm just not a huge fan of that. Although there's defense for it. Don't get me wrong. There's understandable reasons. I just wish that there was any other way to get him off the team. One thing I will say to that though, grateful I never have to watch him play basketball again. That's one thing I will say. Did not enjoy the Bradley Beal experience at all. And I'm not going to miss watching him play.
Let's be honest. It would have been a massive distraction that they simply felt they could not afford if Bradley Beal was still on the team because they were unable to find a trade partner, and they would have had to, I don't know, it would have been a thing at media day throughout training camp. They may have had to send him home. They certainly wouldn't have wanted to play him when they've just now invested a lot in Jalen Green. I get it. Like, I understand you're within your right to criticize their cap management and all that. And yes, it's going to be annoying to have to deal with for the next 5 years. But I am so relieved that Bradley Beal is no longer a member of the Phoenix Suns in any way, shape, or form. In spite of my criticisms about Kevin Durant, at least I've always been able to recognize his like godly talent, his generational talent. Bradley Beal, I just view as a loser. I mean, he's just a career loser. And you're laughing, Dan, but like really the way you don't understand unless you've been there how miserable the last 2.5 years have been for Suns fans. Has just been the most miserable. And I've watched and I've covered worse teams from a record perspective. But you look up the definition of auraless in the textbook. This was an auraless era of Suns basketball. They were miserable to watch. They played with absolutely no pace, no movement on offense, no effort on defense. And we're just so relieved that both of these guys are gone, frankly.
I get the relief aspect of it, but as you pointed out, like the cap management stuff is tough to get around because I doubt they're very close to ducking the tax entirely now. I doubt there was a way to do that without going this direction, but they certainly could have gotten out of the second apron. And so that's why I just view it as sort of a cheap out. If you're Matt Ishbia and you're claiming you'll pay whatever, like you could have gotten out of the set or avoided the second apron and avoided like starting the clocks on your like draft picks. You could have avoided that without having this massive Bradley Beal hit on the books. And you could have just said, hey, I'll pay him for 2 years to not play basketball then if he's not going to agree to a trade somewhere, assuming they could even find one. I think that's sort of because Milwaukee did what they did with Dame to actively like get somebody, and the Suns just did it to save money. And for someone who is, like Mike said before, they've invested a lot in the team, they've spent a lot of money, like I don't know, this just kind of feels like a weak move by them. I get the addition by subtraction, especially when it comes to their culture, and as you guys already said, Jalen Green is now on the roster, but I just like, what is I just don't know what message this sends to your fans about the next half decade when you have that money on the books. It says, like Mike did, there's not going to be cap space anytime soon. And I know stars change teams via free agency anymore. Don't change teams via free agency anymore, but you don't have trade assets to go out and make those types of trades. So it just felt like a really weak move by them. And that's just sort of where I landed. And I understand there's probably no perfect solution, but that's the perils of trading for someone that has a no trade clause.
Mm-hmm. Never again.
Sam, what do you make of the regime change in the front office and how they went about hiring Brian Gregory?
Not great. Man, you're hitting us with the hard questions. Look, for anyone who doesn't know, maybe doesn't follow the team as closely, Matt Ishbia has this close connection to Michigan State, and it's become, I think it started as a joke, but is also just a fact at this point that he has heavily prioritized people in interview processes throughout the organization who share that that Michigan State background with him. And as we look at Brian Gregory, who's now the GM of the team and was at Michigan State with Matt Ishbia, it's just not someone who would have gotten this job from any other team. He has a 20 years experience as a college coach, but not a particularly successful one, like a lot of mid-major programs that maybe struggle to recruit, struggle to make NCAA tournaments, that sort of thing, and just doesn't have NBA front office experience. And yet he's now the general manager of the Suns. And it sucks, frankly. But, I'm still willing to give him a chance. It's more so just that we recognize that, I think what's interesting about Ishbia is, in spite of the fact that he has been at the core of every decision made by the Suns over the 2.5 years since he's acquired the team. He has largely tried to distance himself from, that level of accountability, saying that like the Kevin Durant trade, the Bradley Beal trade weren't necessarily his ideas, trying to pawn that off on other people in the organization. When you make decisions like this to hire people who just don't deserve the jobs that they're in, you can't distance yourself from that accountability anymore. We now fully understand that this is Matt Ishbia's show. Every decision that is made is because of Matt Ishbia. It's not because of Brian Gregory or anyone else, Josh Bartlestein, who's the CEO, or anyone else. This is Matt Ishbia's decision. And so that's fine. Okay, if that is what it is, like I understand you spent $4 billion on the team, you want to make those decisions, but you're going to get the criticism that comes with that. And I just hope Ishbia kind of comes around to understanding that going forward, that we can all kind of see through the facade, those of us who like are used to watching and covering these teams anyway, and we know what the situation is.
Mike, how did you feel about the Jordan Ott hire? I know very little about him aside from, hey, he's also got ties to the state of Michigan.
Michigan State University. In fact, he got his master's degree there, but he was an intern, I believe, under Tom Izzo. Brian Gregory, by the way, I will mention, coached Matt Ishbia. Like, the ties are very strong. He was literally an assistant coach when Matt Ishbia was on that championship team at Michigan State. I think that Jordan Ott, though, the coaching search, like, Brian Gregory does not have a resume that should have allowed him to be a general manager in the NBA. Jordan Ott has a resume that does lead to him being a head coach in the NBA. Even though he does have a tie to Michigan State, it's loose at best. But DeMare Carroll is an assistant coach for the Suns now, I will mention, because they met when Jordan Ott was an assistant to Mike Budenholzer on the Atlanta Hawks, and then he went on to be at other stops with him in the future. DeMare Carroll described Jordan Ott as the architect of the Cleveland Cavaliers offense last year. And if you watch the way the Cleveland Cavaliers played offense last year, it's a very exciting prospect. It's a pick and roll heavy offense that has a ton of off-ball movement. They play fast. They play with pace in the half court. They shoot threes, but they also get to the rim. And I think they have a guy who understands the nuances of modern NBA basketball and kind of addresses all of the problems that the Phoenix Suns had last year. The Suns also signed a player named Nigel Hayes-Davis, he was the MVP of the EuroLeague Final Four last year. That's how they do the MVPs there. And he described Jordan Ott as having the type of basketball-tism that you need to be a successful NBA coach, which not the way I would describe it, but Nigel Hayes-Davis's point was like,
Nigel Hayes-Davis is a very funny guy if you watch interviews with him.
Yes, he is. Jordan Ott is someone who is very, very clearly, the way that everyone describes him, obsessed with basketball and wants to understand sort of where it's going in the future. And I think I'm excited to see, like, ultimately understanding basketball is only a small part of the job. Every head coach does understand it to some extent. It's about how you communicate that to your team and how much buy-in that they have. So, we'll see. Like, they don't have the personnel to be a great team, but if we see them playing the right way on a day-to-day basis, I think that's an exciting thing, especially for a young coach who could be with the team for a long time. So fingers crossed, ultimately, for me.
I think the way he emphasized, and I guess that was his introductory presser that I was reading quotes from, movement, just felt really important because, like, that feels like this team's best shot at generating rim pressure for the first time since 2019 or like 2017.
Rim pressure? Wow, I don't even know. Yeah, something like that.
So, I'm more open to that. Like, that felt like a process that was a real process, at least their coaching hire. So, but those are the toughest hires to judge as well, is because you have to see it play out on the court. And I don't know, with the personnel they have, like, I don't know how much you hang on his shoulders. He does have a reputation. I think he got a lot of that in Atlanta for his player development. And so, like, that could bode well for, some of those internal development guys that you talked about on your podcast. Who knows?
Good plug.
Sam, what do you make of the Devin Booker extension and the reaction to it? And will there be limits to this dude's loyalty? I thought what Mike said at the top was interesting. I never really thought of it in those terms about how he understands why Devin Booker wants to play for one team when you look at how these fans that adopt you basically via trade, how they can react when you don't perform up to snuff.
Ultimately, I don't know Devin Booker personally, and so I don't really know.
Whoa, hold on. Is that true?
That's true, man. I don't know the inner machinations of his mind, but the extension that you're referring to, I think it's important because, as you know, Dan, you know maybe better than anyone else, people don't read these days. They don't really process things beyond headlines.
Goes well for my livelihood, let me tell you.
and short clips. And so let's just point out the fact that was a 2-year, $145 million extension that Devin Booker signed, which does not kick in until 2028. I think the 2028-2029 season, he has a full 3 years left on his current deal before that extension even kicks in. I think the reason that's important to highlight is because I saw a lot of headlines based on a factual statement, which is that like Devin Booker signs most lucrative extension per year ever, which is technically true. But by the time that extension actually kicks in, it will be the same equivalent extension or even less that other guys are signing. You know, like Jokic hasn't signed his extension yet.
Mm-hmm.
Giannis hasn't signed his extension yet. Jason Tatum, I think, did sign, or Jason Tatum was on like a little bit of an earlier timeline, you know, signing a contract extension like a couple years ago, but he will be signing an extension by 2028 that is even more lucrative than the one that Devin Booker will be on, right? So, of course, you can have questions. Is Devin Booker going to be playing at a $72.5 million level when he's 33? Probably not. This is just something you do. It's just something you have to do, and whatever, you know, keeps the guy, you know, happy and in your environment, it's worth it. And there's simply no alternative for the Suns. Devin Booker is synonymous with the city of Phoenix at this point. You have the opportunity to potentially make this guy a Suns lifer. Maybe he gets sufficiently pissed off at some point that isn't the case, and it becomes like a Damian Lillard in Portland situation where he has to go try something else and fail for a couple years, and then he comes back. You never know. But yeah, it's I have absolutely no issues with the Booker contract extension.
I totally understand it from the team's perspective. And it's also just, there's like, they guaranteed technically an extra 1 year when you look at the player option, the way it moves. So they gave him the ability to guarantee 2 years. I guess what confuses me, not about the extension, but it's tough to square away like how loyal he might be versus I don't believe necessarily where this team is headed. But like, it feels like there has to be limits to his loyalty at some point, or I don't see this ending any other way than, well, he's eventually going to get traded. That doesn't mean you don't give him the extension. Again, this is totally separate from that. So, Mike, what would need to happen, not to finalize his entire future with the team this year, but like, what does a season look like in which the Suns send a message to Devin Booker that says, we're at least headed in what could be the right direction from here?
It's a great question. Making the playoffs, I think, would be really helpful. And that is, I think it's an uphill battle for them in this coming year. It would take a pretty massive season by guys we're going to talk about soon. I'm sure Jalen Green and Mark Williams in particular. If those guys can find a way to be the best they've ever been next year, maybe they have some small chance of that. But like, you know, like it's a lot on the team to put it together and to justify it for him. But I also think he needs to play better too. Last year, I think, was such a disaster in so many ways. So many of the players on the Suns played below what they could do. And it seems like the unhappiness post trade deadline, after the Suns tried to sneak trade Kevin Durant, just permeated the entire locker room, and nobody really played well beyond that trade deadline. So it's really difficult to square what this season will look like to what last season looked like. It just, nobody seemed to like Mike Budenholzer either. And we were excited about that. 25-7. That's what he averaged last year. 25 points, 7 assists. And I would call it a bad season for Devin Booker, which is just, it says where we're at with him and how we view what's expected out of him. But so much more of what the team is going to look like rests on his shoulders next year. There is no Kevin Durant anymore. He is very clearly the main leader on this team and the main superstar on this team. And so, ultimately,
perhaps the only competent pick and roll ball handler remains to be seen, but there's a chance that's true.
Sam, on one of your podcasts recently, you had said something like Devin Booker better play defense this year. My first thought was like, he just posted his highest true usage. For anyone who just doesn't know, like, it incorporates passing, potential assists of his career, and it might need to be higher this
Mhm.
season when you just
It
look at
does need to
Jalen
be
Green
higher.
and Collin Gillespie. So can you expect him to be much better on defense? I don't even know if that warrants a discussion.
Well,
but
defense is so much of a vibes thing too, though. It's and an infectious energy thing. And again, I just point to the fact that I recognize that much of this is a faith-based argument, the addition by subtraction stuff. But you look at the true miserable expressions on the faces of every Suns player last year in the way that they played defense. It truly brought them no joy, and it brought me no joy to watch any of them try to play defense. That you hope that a lot of this injection of youth and energy that the Suns and length, by the way, too. That was a big thing we kind of didn't touch on with Jordan Ott is, yes, he wants to play fast. He wants to play with movement. But the other thing they're trying to steal from Cleveland, and many other teams are doing this around the league, but recognizing that it's not 2015 anymore. You can't be the small ball Warriors and still win anymore. You actually need to be big at many positions. And with the guys the Suns brought in this summer, they're actually projected, their starting lineup is a bit of a problem, and I'm sure we'll get there too, but they can implement lineups that are absolutely huge in their front court while still trying to play fast and maybe shoot a lot of threes. And I think that's, something they're trying to steal in particular from Cleveland. So yeah, Devin Booker needs to play defense. I know it's not fair, but he signed up for this.
I'm not trying to absolve him of playing defense, to be clear. It feels like there's even more offensive responsibility on his shoulders, and so
there is.
It
but
probably
you make
helps that
$70 million. You got to play both sides, buddy. Sorry,
Mike. What does the optimal version of Jalen Green look like on this team, and how confident are you that he has the ability to actualize it?
I'm. You know what? I should ask you this. Is there like I'm as I talk, I'm not going to put you on the spot right away, but as I talk, try and think about what a good optimal Jalen Green comp is in a player. Like, think about a player that you could compare what that is to, if you have any idea, because I'm
nice.
struggling to. I'm
what
struggling
about Zach
to think
LaVine?
LaVine is interesting.
I think I brought that up. Did I bring that one up on a pod?
Possibly.
I think I did.
Like, I want it to be like Derek White. I want him to try on defense, and I want him to shoot 10 or 11 threes a game, and just get to the rim. If you cut out entirely the mid-range shots, or there's a version of him playing well where he develops a mid-range shot, but he's one of the worst mid-range shooters in the NBA. But if he just focuses on getting to the rim and shooting threes, I think that's the best. The Suns described him as the point guard through Shams Charania. So, they're clearly not thinking the same way as me.
I don't think I still kind of, I know you're saying that, maybe you're right, but I still sort of reject the veracity of that report. I think maybe he's going to guard point guards, but I don't think he's going to be their primary ball handler. We'll see.
To be fair, and sort of to Mike's point, the first year and a half in Houston, that was a different level of defender, or at least effort, from Jalen Green on defense. So maybe he has the ability to get to that level. And I
For
think
the playoffs too, I think he was pretty good on defense.
And you have Dillon Brooks still to insulate him, as well as Ryan Dunn on this team. So there's that's not outside the realm. Derek White is I don't think I ever could see him defending at that type.
It's more of a role. It's more of a role thing that I'm thinking.
Yeah,
about
I think
him. Yeah,
we've talked a lot with Jalen Green about he's been the most optimistic case I think you can take with Jalen on the Suns is that he simply has never played with a game processor like Devin Booker. And we've had 4 years of him being in Houston in an offense that has very little movement, a lot of stagnation, and just has asked him to do a lot of initiation. And it's well, he's 20. How old is he now? 23? 22. It's year 5. What if you just give up on the idea of Jalen Green being a superstar and just let him be, a pretty good kind of number 3-ish type role player option, maybe number 2 if he can get up there instead, where he's almost exclusively playing off of Devin Booker instead of being a primary initiator, really focusing on kind of Morey balling his game. Again, that's not something that I think you should do ubiquitously with every player. But in Jalen Green's case, I really think it would suit him to cut out a lot of the mid-range garbage and just focus on being a little bit more of a role player. And maybe he could excel in that role, still average 20 points a game, but, in a kind of, to Mike's point, Derek White sort of way. Instead of a Zach LaVine sort of way. So I don't know. We'll see.
LaVine, though, I will say, Dan, is a good comp in that LaVine shoots a ton of threes too. Jalen Green did. I don't want to imply that Jalen Green didn't shoot a ton of threes last year. He did. He shot a lot of threes last year, but I think pumping that up even more to try to get to the right place with his shot selection would make a huge difference. But unless the thing about him that's been interesting is 4 years in the league, almost all four of them exactly the same.
Yeah.
There has not been big improvements in his playmaking, in his shot selection, in his overall efficiency as a scorer. It's been 4 years of relatively similar basketball, so it's difficult for me to come up with a version of what he does where I just assume the efficiency is going to make a massive jump, or I assume that the playmaking is going to make a massive jump, or even the defense. So finding the right shot selection within what he's good at, it's a him problem and it's a Jordan Ott problem ultimately. And if they can find a version of that, maybe that's great. But I will say, new player, new team, like young player, new team is a good way to think about it. Maybe there is something there that we didn't see in Houston. Maybe a new situation could actually benefit him in a way that we don't anticipate.
I think your point about Devin Booker, like maybe having an impact on him and is the best sort of advantage creator he's ever played alongside, is a big deal because his spot up efficiency has peaked in like the 60th percentile in his best season. I think it was in like the 0th per B-ball index last year. But I don't like I'm interested to see what the quality of his shots looks like in Phoenix, and can you also just convince him to play off the ball more? And like one of the things that Houston did with a player who's now on the Suns is they reined in Dillon Brooks a lot on the offensive end. And that's where I feel like he had like one of his probably his single best year last season. And so can you figure out a way to, I'm not saying Jalen Green needs to be Dillon Brooks, and like Dillon Brooks still thinks that he could be like a superstar on certain possessions, but is there a way to rein him in? If they're like, I feel like the best way to do that is, you're playing on a good team with a lot of people above you in the pecking order. And I just don't know, aside from Devin Booker, I don't know that they have that contextual juice just yet.
No, you're right. They don't. And in particular, like we were lucky with Booker last year in that he played 75 games, but he's always had little nagging injuries throughout his career. There's a solid chance that Devin Booker plays, 65 games this year or something. And in any game in which Devin Booker misses any time at all, Jalen Green, for better or worse, he's the guy. So that will look probably pretty similar to how it did in Houston, which is to say inefficient basketball maybe prevents your offense from like totally bottoming out, but just won't be good.
Turnovers too, it'll be turnover prone.
Look, here's someone who maybe could save the offense in Collin Gillespie.
Oh,
and
here
so
we
this
go.
is your guys' time to shine.
Here
he's just like the third most important guard on this team now, correct?
Yeah.
Who else would it be?
Are you a Jordan Goodwin fan? I don't know.
Or Jared Butler. Like those two guys are sort of competing for the last spot on the team at this point because Butler is signed to a non-guaranteed deal, just like Goodwin.
Grayson Allen actually added another 40 pounds of muscle this summer. You haven't seen the pictures yet, Dan, but he's pushing.
I don't
he's
know if
pushing
he qualifies
270
as a
now.
guard or a wing, but like Koby Brea interests me too. Can we just slot
me
him
too.
into this spot?
He's very yeah. I don't know if he'll play at all, but
he's on a
Koby
two-way,
Brea
so he can only play 50
He can still
games.
play.
Yeah, but he is very, very, very exciting to me. But yeah, I think Collin Gillespie, he's, by the numbers, he's technically the best pick and roll runner on the team last year, but only ran maybe 50 or 60 of them because he just didn't play much. But, has earned a spot, a guaranteed deal. He was on a two-way last year too, Gillespie. So he earned a guaranteed deal on this team, and it's due to his hustle and his play and his efficiency on and off the ball as a scorer. Can't get to the rim, can't shoot a lot of mid-range shots, but he shoots a ton of threes by the minute, and he can run a pick and roll. And I think, he has some tenacity in rebounds and on defense. He's not going to be great at those things, but he's going to be better than you would anticipate him being.
He's an excellent rebounder for like a 6'1" point guard. Like, yeah, it's not the same as having a guy like, let's say you just have a 6'7" point guard out there, but for his size, pound for pound, Collin Gillespie is an incredible rebounder. It's kind of mesmerizing to watch.
And, he's 27, right? So he is a player who hasn't played much in the NBA that is in his prime years as an NBA player. But yeah, he's going to play a really, really important role, as important as it's going to be when everyone's healthy. It's going to be doubly important if guys miss time, and he's just going to be likely the starting point guard on this team for games. But the Suns do believe in him. Like, they do truly believe in him. We wanted them to add Chris Paul when it was between the Clippers and Phoenix, and they, based on what they've said through their mouthpieces, the Suns didn't want that. They seemed to choose to not have that big of a voice in the locker room and give those opportunities to Collin Gillespie instead. It's a risk because he is small and not had a ton of success, but what he's shown, I'm excited about personally.
He's simply never had this level of on-ball responsibility in the NBA. We've seen a little bit of it in like the G League. Like he goes down to the G League sometimes and averages 10 assists a game and just runs their offense. The G League is not the NBA. What I think is really encouraging about Collin Gillespie is that he is for sure an NBA player in all of the ancillary skills that he displayed, right? Like he can be a secondary playmaker. He can shoot threes at a 40% clip. He can rebound like hell. He can hustle, guard guys 94 feet. That's great. All of that shows me that you are an NBA player. Coming off the bench for 20 minutes a game and like running pick and rolls, though, is that's a different role. That's not something he's really been asked to do in the NBA yet. And so he is suddenly saddled with a lot more responsibility. And either he's going to be the Ty Jerome of this year, to make another Cavs comparison, or he's going to struggle because they're asking him to do a lot more. So we'll see.
The reason I was really in favor of Chris Paul being signed, and now I think it kind of falls to Collin Gillespie, is I do think the world of Devin Booker as a playmaker, like in his role, but Collin Gillespie is probably best suited, more so than anyone else on this roster, to get 3 of their 4 primary bigs like the ball in the way that they want to score. When you're looking at Khaman Maluach, or you're looking at Nick Richards, or you're looking at Mark Williams, I just like, who is the best lob passer on this team? It's probably going to be, like, I really thought CP3, I don't know why he wanted to play for this team personally. Like, I know Phoenix is a good market and he liked it there. There just didn't seem like they were at a timeline to where he would want to go there. But that's why I really wanted them to get like any type of veteran point guard who could run the show. And I'm interested to see if Collin Gillespie can, because they're big men, and specifically Williams and Maluach, who are the 2 most important ones. Like Ighodaro's up there, but like they need someone to get them the ball in the right spots to be most effective. Like I know Mark Williams has like some dynamism to his game, but I don't want to, like, I just don't trust it down low. And I think his range, quote unquote, is very theoretical at this point. So it's a really big moment for Collin Gillespie, and I think you could view it, like you guys said, as like really this big belief in him. But do we think that he's going to be able to help these bigs develop? Do we think that they get to a point where it's like, oh, are they going to want him like in lineups with both Devin Booker and Jalen Green so that he can be the one to delineate touches on offense?
They're going to have to. They're going to have to try, more than anything else, because the bigs are intriguing. In Mark Williams and specifically Khaman Maluach, I think those are the right 2 guys to focus on. I mean, I'm excited about Oso Ighodaro, and we can talk about him too, but they don't create their own shots. They just can't. They're not the type of players to do that. First of all, Khaman Maluach is 18, and Mark Williams only played 110 games or so in the NBA, and what he does is jump really high, catch the ball, and dunk it. And, he's sort of a DeAndre Jordan on offense up to this point of his career, although he can shoot free throws, which is, intriguing at the very least. But they need someone to be able to do that. Collin Gillespie is going to be a guy who they're going to lean on to do that as much as possible. Devin Booker, for all he can do as a passer, he's number 1 in the NBA. This is a stat I bring up a lot, at creating 3-point shots for players. He actually was number 1 in the NBA last year at doing that. But, he's not the best at getting shots for guys at the rim the way, like you said, Chris Paul could and was so capable of, and really benefited DeAndre Ayton early in his career because of that. Book's not that guy to do that. He's going to create a ton of 3-point shots, but not going to get it to them. So it's up to Gillespie, and I hope he's up for it.
What are your thoughts on Mark Williams, Mike? How are you feeling about his fit? What are you monitoring most closely for him?
You wanted to go to Mike on that one, I see. You don't want old boy over here's opinion?
Well, we got to get it. So I think with Mark Williams, I wish that the defensive data was better. But the offensive data already puts him as probably the best offensive center they've had since DeAndre Ayton. So that's helpful. The analysis with Mark Williams that's not overly exciting is that you just cross your fingers that he can stay healthy. And that's like the biggest thing with him, because he's played so little in the NBA so far. But I do think that the Suns were kind of criticized for taking Mark Williams and then taking Khaman Maluach, on the same, within minutes of each other. To be honest, the trade was made and then the draft pick was picked. But I watched Summer League. Khaman Maluach is not ready to start, even on a bad team. I don't think he's ready to start. And they need someone who's more capable of it.
A nonsensical argument for anyone who thought about it for even more than 5 seconds. We know that Mark Williams plays 40 games a year, and we know that Khaman Maluach is not ready. So to have both of those guys on the same team is totally fine. Yeah. Dan, you didn't ask my opinion, but when I see Mark Williams, I see prime Dwight Howard, but 80% from the free throw line. Maybe Brook Lopez range from deep. I I have stock. We are ready for the Mark Williams renaissance.
So if you're buying stock, Sam, how do you feel about him defensively then? Because every time I watch him, most of the good plays feel like they happen on accident.
I know, you're 100% right. So the real concerns to have outside of health with Mark Williams are defense. I actually had a conversation with Mike about this where I was asking, like, who are you more concerned about defensively between Jalen Green and Mark Williams? Both of these guys have had their defensive issues. And I think in general, centers are so much more important to your defensive scheme. So you'd be tempted to say Mark Williams. On the other hand, Mark Williams, like, we just can't discount the Charlotte Hornets of it all. The total lack of consistency, the total lack of, like, you know, having less than an average of 25 players in their rotation per season just makes it hard to develop, right, any sort of like chemistry with your teammates. Whereas a huge reason why Jalen Green is so concerning defensively is because he was otherwise, like, he was the anchor in a negative way that was holding down a really good defensive team and a really good defensive rotation, where it was just so obvious that Jalen Green was like the guy who was struggling out of all those players. And Mark Williams, I don't know. It's just like hard for me to attribute responsibility towards Mark Williams versus LaMelo Ball or Brandon Miller or Miles Bridges or any of those other disasters who have played for the Charlotte Hornets over the past few years.
Yeah, I think with him, the lack of, even when he had like that nice stretch to close the season, I just haven't seen, like, Charles Lee is a good defensive coach. That Hornets team punched above its weight a lot. And him as a rim protector, he might have some of the worst timing as just like a big contesting shots to where he will leave his feet like at the faintest. Like, and it could be a non-shooter who's like, it could be Ryan Dunn, like trying to take a step back or something with like 21 seconds left on the shot clock. So I don't trust him on defense. And I think for what they gave up for him is fine. I'm with you. I don't think Maluach is going to be ready for a huge role. When I was doing my summer league breakdown of him, it was, I guess, tools are there, but he just still feels so raw. But I'm not like a Mark. The price they paid again, I'm not a Mark Williams believer. Offensively, maybe sure, but as you kind of said, Sam, in the discussion that you guys did have on that podcast, I really do think the center position is so critical to defense that he has not shown nearly enough to me, aside from being accidentally huge on certain and long on certain possessions, that I would trust him as like an anchor of an above average defense long term.
Accidentally huge would be a decent slogan for the Suns this year in general. I think of just like, you know, that's what we hang our hat on. We're actually accidentally large.
That should have been a DeAndre Ayton nickname, actually, now that I think about him in the past. But I do think Jordan Ott, you know, has experience with Mobley and Jared Allen. And the one thing I will say about Mark Williams defensively is that for bigs, part of what makes you good at playing defense in the NBA is consistently playing, and he hasn't. Like, you have to find that timing, and if your time in the NBA is so stilted with injuries, it's really difficult to get that consistency to be able to be better at defense. So I think there is a world that he gets better. I understand the skepticism overall of what his ceiling could be defensively. It's probably not very high. And luckily the Suns drafted who they think could be their future center. And maybe there's a world where Maluach develops a little quicker and becomes that. But I do think if there is a world where he plays 65 games this year, which probably not. I mean, there's just no evidence that he can. But if he can, I think there's a chance that he becomes somewhat of a better defender by the end of the season than he was at the beginning. And that improvement finally actually comes for him.
Would you guys be shocked if he got an extension, or do we expect this to go to just restricted free agency 100%?
I wouldn't be shocked. It depends on how he plays and how healthy he is, but I think there's a world where you could put together a deal for him that is so contingent on his ability to stay healthy that the Suns have an easy out if it doesn't work for him. And,
actually, do we know who Mark Williams' agent is by any chance?
Great question. Is he Josh Bartlestein's dad? Is that what you're asking?
I would just think that he would so strongly value any guaranteed money.
Jeff Schwartz.
Okay, so not Bartlestein. All right.
No, that's Priority Sports. Is that what that is? I'm sorry. We care a lot about agents on our podcast. I don't know, Dan, if you do, but we have a lot of conversations about them.
I do not follow it as closely as you guys do. I don't get into like the who represents who of
Excel
it all.
Sports. Yeah.
So, Sam, how do you feel about Maluach, and what type of a role do you like? What type of runway is he going to have to develop on this Suns team this year?
So his role in year one is going to be Gazelle learning to dribble a basketball and walk and chew gum at the same time. Like it's going to be, funny. There are going to be some Khaman Maluach lowlights this year that I think if you just want to point at those and be like, ha ha, big man struggle to play basketball good, then like, sure, okay, fine. What was so exciting about him in Summer League is just like, here's an 18-year-old who wasn't asked to do all that much in his role at Duke, but then just has the will to immediately go out there and try dribbling the basketball and try shooting threes and try doing things that we know maybe statistically he's not going to be good at immediately. But coming from this experience of having drafted DeAndre Ayton #1 overall and committing 5 years to his development, and he never could get as far as like doing anything other than an elbow mid-range jumper, to then have a guy come in and be so willing to learn and really just the effusive praise that is being heaped on Maluach from other guys who were part of that Summer League roster, saying that he was constantly the captain of the defense and the loudest guy that they had on defense. It's like, that's just exactly what you want to hear about your 18-year-old rookie. And honestly, it's pretty surprising too that he's already there. So I just don't think statistically it's going to be there in year one. You're going to have to read between the lines on him a little bit at the beginning. But like, if you watch him dribbling the ball, if you watch him attempting threes, if you watch him, being vocal on defense, the intangible stuff is there that you just have to buy into his combination of athleticism and work ethic and trust the process.
Do you think the Suns have like the stomach to go through those growing pains this season, or is there a level of like immediate expectations here because they're on this weird timeline right now? Frankly I don't know like what their aim is. They're trying to develop and also still be relevant because what else is there to do? But
yeah, they don't own their picks. Yeah.
So like, what type of a leash do you think? Like, is this going to be maybe after the All-Star break thing? They'll have a better sense of where they are, so that's when he could get more run.
They drafted Maluach, who is 18. He will be 19 this coming season. He's played basketball since he was 14. So, I mean, they're showing some willingness there, right? I mean, they have to be because and then also I will say they hired a coach who's famous for his player development. Mm. Like, so I think that they are showing some willingness, and this is a credit to Devin Booker's willingness to give it some time too. But that how far and how long that patience will last remains to be seen. We'll see if that's something he feels next year as well as this year, but they're showing some willingness to have some patience for this season just based on the decisions they've made. But, Maluach, I think Sam said it early on in the podcast, like so much of how successful the Kevin Durant trade is viewed will be dependent on his development. And ultimately, like the Suns have, I will say, they have Mark Williams, they have Nick Richards, they have Oso Ighodaro, they have Khaman Maluach, meaning they have 4 guys who could play center on this team. Maluach is going to be the worst one on the court when the season begins, but they still have to play him. They just have to. They have to give him the time to develop. They have to allow him to make the mistakes that he's going to make early on in the season, and they have to figure out what they have with him by next season. And ultimately, like if they get to a point at the end of the season where they say, okay, we've developed these young guys. We have Ryan Dunn, we have Maluach, we have Jalen Green, and maybe they decide to make a trade with 2 or 3 of those guys and try to find someone who can help accelerate the team and be better next season next to Devin Booker. Maybe that's something they do. I don't know if that's a good decision or a bad, depending on the trade, but they do have to find out what they have this season with the young guys they have on the team.
Sam, where are you at with Oso Ighodaro?
He's like a fun little project. I think a very smart player, a very capable player. It's obviously fun to watch him hoist up floaters and be this like secondary connector, and he's going to continue to be like an important option. Anytime he shares the floor with Devin Booker, for instance, because we know Devin Booker as being like in a more heliocentric system now where he's going to be a single star, there's going to be a lot of blitzing Devin Booker this season. It's no secret. Jordan Ott knows it. He's talked about it. Or maybe Jordan Ott hasn't directly talked about it. Nigel Hayes-Davis, who we mentioned earlier, and maybe we'll talk about again, did an interview where he was talking about having a conversation with Jordan Ott about how Devin Booker is going to be blitzed all the time. One of the best short roll playmaking options they have to sort of counteract that, Oso Ighodaro. So it helps to have these really smart, skilled bigs Can he play power forward? They certainly tried it a lot in summer league. Can he show any sort of offensive juice whatsoever to like get to the rim a little bit more and not just hit you with the floater? Or his shooting form is so far off, but can he give you a 15-foot mid-range elbow jumper even at some point? Can he shoot better than 60% from the free throw line? These are still big questions with Oso. And if the answer to those is no, he doesn't really have a future as an NBA player. But if he develops any of those skills, then he's a really interesting development project for them. And I am sure that they will find time to play him. Compared to Maluach, who we were just talking about, I don't really know who plays more this year. I would guess that maybe Maluach plays more than Oso, but truthfully, I don't know. Depends a lot on Mark Williams' health. Depends a lot on their stomach for playing Oso at power forward too.
And Maluach is 3. Because if he can shoot threes right away, which I think they're going to let him do, then maybe they can play together.
I want to see more of those. He opened summer league basically with the spinning lefty hook. I want to see more of those. Like, let's just give Maluach like the ultimate license on offense.
I agree.
I'm here for it.
Why not?
So is there a dual big lineup in particular that you would like to see them try, where it's Oso at the 4, and then who do you want at the 5? Would it be Maluach in that case, or Sam's a big believer in Mark Williams hitting 3-pointers at like an 80% clip or something, right?
I would think he will. I mean, like, let's just be honest. I know you're not huge on Mark Williams, but if you're talking about like, let's have a good net rating right now, and you play Oso at the 4, then yeah, you probably want him next to Mark Williams. If you're just interested in the future potential, Oso and Maluach together would be very interesting as well. I also wouldn't discount the possibility, Dan, that Maluach will play a bit at the 4 with Mark Williams. Would not shock me at all. I don't think, again, not a coincidence that they hired the guy who worked with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And I just think that's totally on the table for them too.
Not only is it not a coincidence, they talked a lot in the offseason about double big lineups, offensive rebounding. They openly talked about it, whether it be Brian Gregory, Jordan Ott, or even Matt Ishbia. Like, they're talking about that as what the league is leaning towards. And even the Rockets, the team that KD's on, they seem to be a team that's going to be willing to start Şengün and Adams. Neither are floor spacers. And maybe there is a world where there is some sort of workable NBA offense with non-floor spacing bigs, 2 of them on the floor in the future.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that with the Rockets as to whether they're going to try and start like a little bit of that, where it's like mash basketball is back. You need one of them to be like a good playmaker, but like kind of the days of Evan Mobley needs to shoot threes in Cleveland. Like, I wonder if that's no longer like the bar for
some sort of dribbling matters too. That's the Oso Ighodaro thing that Sam mentioned too, right? It's not just shooting, but some sort of dribbling and playmaking along with that could really, really go a long ways for him.
Mike, I thought Ryan Dunn, interesting last year. The 3-point efficiency obviously didn't hold. The volume, I think, was more than fine. I know everyone's going to point to the 3-point efficiency and say this needs to go up. What other like developmental aspects aside from that, though, should we be monitoring as he heads into year 2?
The defense. It's they're actually going to put him, I think, in a really tough position to start this season, in that he's going to essentially be the starting power forward. I mean, I guess you could say it's Dylan Brooks, but I think that Ryan Dunn is a little taller, and that puts him in the position to guard bigger guys occasionally. And I don't think that's necessarily his skill set, but the reason he was drafted, the reason he was a first-round pick, in fact, is his projected defense. And we have to see some of that become a reality. There were times where he played good defense last year. There was times where he was fouling too much, and there was times where he was a little weak defensively last year. But for him to be successful, there is an obvious path where if he shoots 35% from 3, and does that consistently, then yes, he can be an NBA player. But he really has to show what that projected defense is for him in the NBA soon for him to have a long career in the NBA, because I don't think he can get away with playing defense like he did last year, but he was a rookie, right? So we just have to see that really come together for him. And I think he seems to be a really hard worker and someone who thinks about the game a lot, spent every day in the gym this offseason at the Suns practice facility, in fact. So I'm pretty excited to see what he can do next year.
Do you think that playing like Dylan Brooks is I would call him a malleable defender. It's where he's not super big, but he can guard a bunch of different spots. Like, do you think that gives them the ability to make life easier on Ryan Dunn, to maybe put him in better, even though he's the starting forward, but to maybe tailor his assignments accordingly?
It's a fascinating thing, because we're talking about a starting lineup that has Devin Booker and Jalen Green in it as well. So like in some ways you have to hide both of those guys. So yeah, I mean, if you're playing a team like, say, the Lakers, they have LeBron James and they have Luka Doncic. You have two guys who can do that, but then who guards Austin Reeves? It can be one of those situations where one of the guys in Devin Booker and Jalen Green has to guard a guy no matter what. But I think Ryan Dunn, I think his best abilities last year were guarding smaller ball handlers, shooting guards and point guards. And if they can find a way to do that for him regularly and just sort of say, Dylan Brooks, you're guarding Şengün tonight, like if they do start Steven Adams and Şengün, you got to put Dylan Brooks on Şengün. I don't think you could put Ryan Dunn on him. He's just not strong enough. He doesn't have the base necessary to do that. And really, Dylan Brooks doesn't either, but you're sort of dealing with what your best options are with what you have at that point. So yeah, they're going to have to, Dylan Brooks, I think, is going to have a positive impact on Ryan Dunn, period. Like just in general, I think putting a little more of the Dylan Brooks mindset into Ryan Dunn, that alone will have a positive impact on him. But also having another guy who can guard bigger will be helpful. Yes.
Sam, what are your early impressions of Koby Brea, and would you predict that they will convert him to a regular contract by the end of the season?
Absolute baller. It helps, by the way, that every single young guy we've talked about, I mean, say what you will for all of their respective talent, it remains to be seen. But all of these guys are just smart. They haven't drafted any dummies recently, and that's been very intentional. We talked about Ryan Dunn, Oso's ability to process the game, and then this year, Maluach's work ethic, Rasheer Fleming's work ethic, and now Koby Brea, who you're talking about, his work ethic. And I've watched some interviews with him where he just has a really sharp way of processing the game as well, and lots of different guys whose tape he watches in order to help him as an average-sized wing at the next level, that he understands that's what he is. I would love for Koby to get an ability to really play a little bit and for his shooting to pop and ultimately for them to convert him from a two-way. There is kind of this glut of wings standing in his way, right? And again, it goes back to that, that topic of what is the timeline this year, and do they want to win games? Do they feel that playing a lot of Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal, who are both still on the team and both competent, capable NBA wings, is that going to help them win more? Or is there going to be a need for someone like Koby Brea at some point who is a better movement shooter even than Grayson Allen? Like Grayson Allen's an awesome shooter. Koby Brea is like incredible. His potential for shooting at the next level is truly something you don't see very often. So I don't know. It just comes back to that question of how much can they stomach kind of giving these guys a runway.
Are there any other players you want to talk about that we haven't discussed before we move on? Any scorching hot Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal, or you guys have mentioned Nigel Hayes-Davis?
Nigel Hayes-Davis. Yeah, you want to take a mic or should I? I mean, I can talk about him, yeah. He's the Jimmy Butler of the EuroLeague if you watch his tape a little bit, but with a 3-point shot. So basically, I don't know, what is that, Larry Bird? So he's set
right, so
the
Mark
record.
Williams is Dwight Howard. Nigel Hayes-Davis is Larry Bird. You're building a hell of a team.
He's EuroLeague Larry Bird. No, the thing about Nigel Hayes-Davis is he's a 6'7" shooter and shot creator who doesn't really play pick and rolls, at least based on the highlights. Like he does a lot of post ups and he does a lot of like off ball stuff. And you're talking about Koby Brea. I think it's important to mention too that Grayson Allen is like the most obvious trade candidate on this team based on his contract. And if there's a world where the Suns do like a 2-for-1 trade where they put a couple of guys together to trade for someone mid-season, Grayson Allen probably is that guy. And now they have maybe Nigel Hayes-Davis and Koby Brea to step in and do some of the stuff offensively, at least, that Grayson Allen did. But Nigel Hayes-Davis, I think, was the best player in EuroLeague last year as far as scoring. He has the highest scoring game in EuroLeague history. I think 51 points is what he ended with in that game that he played. A little bit of cherry picking involved, but hey, I think he's allowed if you're trying to chase that record. But
shorter games too.
He's 30, right? He's 30 years old, and I think that's important to mention with this team because it is a really young team. And he's a guy who's played professional basketball for 10 years. And I think there's a world where, especially when guys are not in and out of the lineup, guys are not playing. I think there's a world where Nigel Hayes-Davis actually plays a bigger role than we anticipated for this team going forward. If he can do movement shooting at 6'7", that's valuable. Like there's just not a ton of guys who can do a lot of movement shooting. And he did it in EuroLeague. Whether or not that translates to the NBA remains to be seen. He's one of those guys where there's a chance he doesn't play at all. And there's a chance he has a much bigger role than we anticipated. And I don't think I think it's too early to predict which one it's going to be for him.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he could be. I remember when the Suns brought in Sonny Weems, like 10 years ago from playing overseas, and it could be
Mike
another
James.
one of those, or Mike James. It could be another one of those situations, or this could be the Yabusele of this year, where he starts playing pretty immediately and makes an impact, and you have people saying, "Oh, it's actually a really good player." So we'll see. He's funny. He's charismatic too, which helps. I'm just rooting for him.
Are you guys ready to enter the cookie cutter / lightning round portion of the podcast?
Let's do it. I know we're always going long in this podcast, so I apologize already.
No, look, you guys are fine.
Okay, cool.
Let's begin here. So I'll start with you, Mike. Looking at this roster as of right now, without having seen it together on the court in full, what is its single biggest need to you?
I think, that's interesting. I think the single biggest need for this team is another star player next to Devin Booker. Like
talent.
Talent.
You have Dwight Howard with a 3-point shot and Mark Williams. I don't understand why you need another co-star.
Yeah.
And European, but actually American Larry Bird. Let's not forget.
Yeah. No, I think to me, it's just very clear that there's so much on Devin Booker's shoulders, which I think will be kind of fun to watch at times. But if you want to be a great team, like a truly great team, they need, what they had in Chris Paul, and then at times what they had in Kevin Durant, who obviously was great, but that team was never put together in a way that benefited either of them. So, I don't know, maybe that is Jalen Green, or maybe it's Maluach at some point in the future, or maybe it's whoever they trade Jalen Green and Maluach for, at the trade deadline or in the offseason or something. It's difficult to really say what that is going to be, but to me, that is the biggest need.
Sam, do you have a second biggest need for them?
Other than talent?
Draft picks? No.
Yeah, draft picks. Future.
You did say that Grayson Allen you think is the most likely to be traded. You don't think that Royce O'Neal, his salary is a little smaller?
It is smaller, yeah, but I think it's smaller in a way that the Suns like.
Who do you think is more valuable, Dan?
Yeah.
I think it's Royce O'Neal.
Because of the contract.
He's probably one of the most underappreciated players of the last 5 or 7 years.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. He just fits on every team.
I think that's DeAndre Ayton personally, but
Wait, what did you say? I didn't hear that.
I think that's DeAndre Ayton, one of the most underappreciated players of the last.
Yeah.
Bradley Beal is probably the first guy I'd think of.
He's probably underappreciated by every other team since he submarined the Suns from within.
Yeah,
that's true.
Sam, so we'll start with you here. Is there something about this team, whether it's a strength, another weakness, a storyline, development, whatever, that's flying under the radar that you think deserves a bigger spotlight?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's because they're so young, but, just underscoring the fact again that they are long. They, very intentionally have been scouting as many players as possible with these 7-foot+ wingspans. And I don't think people realize that, I think at times they're going to struggle to score, but also they're probably going to grab a lot of offensive rebounds, and they're probably going to get a lot of deflections in a way that they just weren't able to impact the game in the past. And I don't know, if you want an optimistic case on the Suns and you're looking for ways to maybe potentially hit their over-under, that could be it. That just, they're going to tap into a pure effort that they simply did not display in the past couple of years. I think they're going to be much more of a league pass team this year. Even if they don't win as many games, they're just going to be more fun to watch.
I had this in the outline and skipped over it, but in part because they're so huge, I find myself very intrigued by what they could be defensively, which feels very weird to say about a team that's built or headlined by Devin Booker and Jalen Green, first and foremost. What do you make of this? Could this be a team that could you see their defense outperforming their offense? Is that the expectation within?
Absolutely, their defense.
Okay.
It's almost my baseline expectation. I don't know. I guess I'm not sure.
I didn't realize it was that duh. I thought I was proposing something novel.
No. I'm not here to criticize your.
No, I'm not saying you're criticizing. That's why I have this podcast, because
there.
I'm not as in touch with what the fan base is thinking or what the internal expectations are.
Well, so we do our over-under. We make our own over-unders for the team every year and then release it as an episode. And we haven't done that yet. Mike always sets those. But Mike, would you say, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah.
Is your expectation that the offense or the defense ranks better this year? You think it's offense? Okay.
I do.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's so. But I do think that, to your point, Dan, the defense is if you're looking at what culture the Suns are trying to reset the culture right now, and if you look at the culture that they're trying to set for this team, the thing that Matt Ishbia has talked about since the end of the season was trying to find a team where guys are working hard every single night, and the fan base will leave the games. This is how he describes it. Even if they don't win, thinking, well, at least they tried, because I think that the team was so disappointing.
Hot dogs. That's right.
Yeah. That's
Matt
the main...
Ishbia views his roster as like, give me the guys who theoretically could sell the most mortgages possible. Give me a team full of, give me just a team full of star entrepreneurs.
Mateen Cleaves is actually finding ways to motivate both the actual mortgage salesman and now the NBA team. But I do think that just roster wise, I think the combination of Jalen Green and Devin Booker and Mark Williams in the starting lineup is where it's difficult for me to say that they can put a great defense together right away, because those are just three defenders that you can't count on every single game. But if you look at the guys that come in on the bench outside of them, if you look at Dillon Brooks and and Ryan Dunn, there is like personnel that you can start slotting in and finding ways to put an interesting defense out onto the floor at times, especially if they are willing to sacrifice some of the offense for it. But I do think that it will be a little more difficult to do that. And I think, honestly, they still have a bunch of guys who can shoot threes. Dillon Brooks, Jalen Green, Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, and then they have Devin Booker. And if you put those guys around Devin Booker, I think you can just find a way to a relatively good offense just based on that alone. So I think it's just going to be an easier path to find a good offense than a good defense.
Mike, is there anything else that you think is flying under the radar about this team?
If they're on a path to win 25 games this season, how cheap can the hot dogs get? Can they go to $1? Can they go to 50 cents? Like, what is Matt Ishbia willing to do to get fans in the games? Will he pay people to watch the team? The games are free right now. Or is he going to offer some money to watch the games on TV to players? That's what I'm interested to see.
Mike hates baseball, but I'm sure he's aware of the 999 challenge at baseball games: 9 hot dogs, 9 beers, 9 innings.
I've actually never heard of that. No, yeah.
Okay, well,
that's heard of that either.
Yeah. I'm disappointed in both of you guys right now, but
That's
I would like to see a Suns version, because it's boring if you do it with 4 quarters.
Yeah,
I think you could tie it to the number of Jalen Green 3-point attempts. I'd like to see if we can get up past 10, 11, 12. Yeah. Jalen Green shoots 14 threes in a game. I'm slamming 14 hot dogs. I'm drinking 14 beers. I think the sky's the limit.
So are you allowed to start from the first 3, or is this cumulative where you don't know until the final buzzer sounds and you find out that
he's going to slam them?
Yeah.
You just got to slam them all at once? No, I think every time he hoists another 3, you got to go
between the quarters, you have to go buy the hot dogs. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so you two are building a 10-man rotation for this team. Who are the starters, and then who are the 5 most used reserves?
I think we could do this together, Sam, because the starters we know, right? It's Devin Booker, Jalen Green, Ryan Dunn, Dillon Brooks, Mark Williams.
Yep.
And then the 2 guys I think there are 3 guys that are absolutely guaranteed to get minutes off the bench in Collin Gillespie, Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen.
I agree.
That's just a guaranteed. So the next 2 guys are the next 2 guys that is the most interesting. And I think Maluach, right? We're just going to start with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then who's the last guy? That is the question.
Would you two be like, even if they're healthy, wouldn't you be a little discouraged if the number 10 overall pick was not like a member of what ends up being their top 10 rotation? Like, I know they might have immediate expectations, but you have real equity invested in this guy.
I mean, I guess there's a chance they start the season without him playing much, and they're trying to get him a little ready. But like midway through the season, this guy should be getting minutes every game he's healthy for. Just period. I think if they're not doing that, we're going to hammer him for it. Yeah.
Based on the last available options, we've listed 9 guys, right? What we're obviously missing is backup power forward. You could say positions don't matter anymore, but that's more or less what we're looking for. Your options are Oso Ighodaro, who's probably the best, I don't know, maybe the best remaining player, but a weird fit at power forward, and we don't know how frequently they're willing to do it. You could do Rasheer Fleming, who they just drafted in the 2nd round, who just has the perfect body to play that position, but obviously no NBA experience. You could do Nigel Hayes-Davis, who also doesn't really have the NBA experience, but has the most veteran basketball playing experience, is maybe the smartest player of those 3. I could see them doing anything, guys. Honestly, I'm not sure who they start with there.
Yeah, I think that
maybe Nigel.
I think that it's probably going to be.
You guys
Nigel.
have sold me on him just talking him up in this podcast. So
yeah, we were. I will
think
remember.
He should start.
Yeah, there was a year. He might, honestly, if Ryan Dunn can't figure it out right early in the season, he might, honestly. But there was a podcast a few years ago where we really sold you on Toumani Camara, and we were right about that.
You were. I actually credit you guys with that like multiple times a year at this point now. Because
nobody had heard of him, and we were like, this guy's going to be good. And then the Suns traded him like 2 weeks later. So, yeah.
Well, it's because we went into Summer League with really the most pathetic Summer League roster you've ever seen of Toumani Camara and Ish Wainwright being the guys who were featured.
Ish. I remember those
and
days.
So we were just clinging on to hope. We were like, this Toumani Camara guy could be something, but
he looked awesome right away. Yeah,
he was.
He's I mean, you guys like really trumped up his defense. Loaded word there. You really built up his defense. But the offensive development from him has just been, I did not see it coming. Like he shot like a real volume of threes last year and hit them at a high clip. And there's some like straight line drive stuff to what he does. And I don't think I ever thought he was going to be a 5-position defender, basically.
100%.
He's fantastic.
And I think there's still some screening stuff that you can do with him that they haven't fully leaned into, but they're going to find a way to do it.
You're right. They probably need like actual spacing to like even try to make that work. And they've decided to punt on that even further for some reason, but neither here nor there. My hot take is that the Suns probably shouldn't have traded him now. In hindsight,
yes.
I feel like they should have tried to keep him.
That is the Toumani Camara trade now.
It is.
Because he's the best player from that trade. Out of DeAndre and Grayson Allen and Yusuf Nurkic, he's the guy. And Nasir Little, if you remember, was in that trade as well. But yeah, that is he's the best player now.
So this is another question for the two of you, and I know it's to some extent matchup dependent, but I'm going to force you to pick anyway. What is the most used or go-to closing lineup for this team?
It's a really good question. It might be the starting lineup, right?
It's probably just the starting lineup, unless one of these young guys is like far more advanced than we're expecting.
So is there someone in particular you'd circle as like, oh, I could see them wedging their way into the closing five?
Royce O'Neal, I think.
That would have been my pick, is over Dunn or something.
Yeah, or even potentially over Jalen Green. I hate to say it, but like I think there's a world where Devin Booker, Royce O'Neal, Ryan Dunn, Dylan Brooks, and then a center could potentially play. It's tough to have that little ball handling, but if there's a team that they need the defense over the offense, then it could be Royce.
What about Collin Gillespie over Jalen Green?
I think there's a world where we're looking at the net rating lineups at the halfway through the season, and they're going to break my heart. Yeah,
I could totally see it. Yeah.
I don't know that I could see it, like politically. I would just be shocked if we see Collin Gillespie closing games over. I don't even mean to dump on Jalen Green, but just you're paying him so much money, and if you want him to have any sort of trade value or force Jalen Green to quote unquote happen, I would just be like, if he's not a regular member of the lineup that's closing games that you're trying to win, we have problems if I'm Phoenix.
Yeah, well, that could still happen though. Like, I'm not going to leave it off the table. I just think the problem with the Suns, or for the Suns, is that not only do they need him to be good to potentially be good this year, I think they, no matter what they say, I think they still view him as a potential trade candidate. So they need him to play in order to sort of boost that stock as well.
We'll start with you, Sam. Is there a quirky or weirdo lineup you want to see Jordan Ott try this year?
It's kind of similar to what we were just talking about. I think, Maluach at the 4, right? But then pair that with, let's say, Devin Booker and Gillespie in the backcourt. I think gives you like enough of a baseline of, dribbling, penetrative ability, shooting ability, right? So let's say Booker and Gillespie, small forward of choice, could be Dylan Brooks, could be Royce O'Neal, could be Ryan Dunn, just someone who's like has the positional size, has some shooting, and then Maluach and Williams, and just see what happens.
I want to see that front court. Now, I had not even considered those two playing together until you mentioned something earlier. I really want to see Maluach.
I don't know if it'll look any good at all. But, I know both Maluach and Mark Williams shot 80% from the free throw line in their respective places last year. And so can either of them actually shoot NBA threes? No idea. But you have more reason to believe that they can than, say, Oso or, these other guys.
Mike, do you have a weirdo lineup?
I do. I think I would go with Devin Booker at the point guard, Royce O'Neal, Dylan Brooks, Oso Ighodaro, and then a center. It'll say Mark Williams, because I think it could be Maluach as well. But I think there's a world where if you create a lineup where Oso Ighodaro is actually the second ball handler, like that's his goal. That's his role. He has to do it. and you can find ways to even potentially run some inverted pick and rolls with other guys setting screens for him. I actually really like the prospect of that. I think Oso Ighodaro was awesome in Summer League, and if there's some of that translates to the NBA, I'd be really excited. But sort of basically putting Devin Booker on the floor with a bunch of guys who could potentially play defense might be the best version of what the Suns could be next year as well in those lineups. It wouldn't shock me if we're looking halfway through the year and that's the best lineups the Suns have.
This was not my choice coming in, but because you both sold me on Nigel Hayes-Davis, I want to see Devin Booker at point. We'll go Dylan Brooks, Royce O'Neal, Nigel Hayes-Davis, and Oso Ighodaro. That's the lineup.
I love it.
That's fun. Yeah. That's a bunch of smart basketball players.
A lot of ball skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
So before I force you guys to make some predictions, is there anyone we haven't talked about that you think warrants some discussion?
I think we've talked about literally every player on the roster except maybe Jimbo Richards, Nick Richards, who we started calling him.
He's trying to sell me used tires. That's all I'm saying.
We started calling him Jimbo Richards because he's got a little elbow jumper that he was breaking out towards the back half of the season. I don't really have anything interesting to say about Nick Richards. He's a player.
They have to keep him because Mark Williams is so injured.
Yeah, like he can.
I'll be annoyed if he's playing over Maluach, though. That'll be something that annoys me as someone who has no emotional ties to the Suns.
Yeah,
that would be insane.
No, I think we covered everyone.
So let's start here. How many games do you think this team can win, and where do you see them landing in the larger context of the Western Conference?
Well, I think I speak for all Suns fans when I say that anything less than 55 games won is probably going to be a disappointment based on where we're setting our expectations. Is that
Sam
right?
has one goal more games than the Rockets, I think is what Sam wants them to win.
That's not true. That's not going to happen.
What needs to happen in Houston for that to even be a reality? I guess Kevin Durant would really have to accelerate the
Kevin Durant just does his thing, sends off a few tweets, and then watch the turmoil begin.
Yeah. We're going to find out that Dylan Brooks was the most important player on that team. That's what's going to happen. Yeah.
My serious answer to your question, Dan, is, well, how did you phrase it? A number of wins? Is that what you
just
like?
If you want to get, you could go floor, ceiling, just get, what would be the number of wins that you think this team could realistically?
So the most recent over-under I saw, I think, was FanDuel at 31.5. And I totally understand all of the various reasons to be pessimistic about this team. Also, the Western Conference is just a beast. 31 wins in the West might be the equivalent of, say, 38 in the East or something. But all that being said, I think 31.5 is a little bit low. I think this team really can. My expectation is like 35, maybe. If I had to just throw a number out there, they could be better.
I think I agree. And that's basically what they did last year. It's not much better or worse, but I think that with them, if they're in sort of the mode of competing for a play-in spot, that's sort of what I would expect. But the floor, if we're talking floor or ceiling, the floor is really low. And, if Devin Booker doesn't play a lot this year, they could be really, really bad. A lot is going to ride on how many games he plays.
I always feel this is an interesting, in a team in a Suns case where they feel so fringe. How many teams would you be prepared to guarantee, specific teams, that they're better than this year? Because
we just did this, actually, yeah.
Utah
Jazz,
and New Orleans
Nets.
might be the only two that I'm prepared to guarantee
Nets?
the Suns will be better than them.
You think
I meant
Nets
in the
will
West
be...
specifically.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Look, I'm a big avid subscriber to Michael Porter Jr.'s podcast, and I think the Nets are going somewhere.
Yeah, in the West, I think it's just the Jazz, and then maybe the Pelicans. That's it.
Yeah, and then there's teams that you could question, how close they could be to the Suns at that point. All the teams that are competing for the play-in spot. Yeah.
Is there a team, I didn't put this on the outline, but a good team in the West that you think they actually match up particularly well against based on how they're built right now?
Not particularly.
They're mentally soft.
Sam
They're mentally soft. Ryan Dunn's going to be in his head. No, a serious answer to that question? Not. I haven't thought about this. I think
it's the starting lineup being relatively small compared to what they can put on the floor makes it a little tougher for me to find a good matchup for them.
Guys, as always, this was fantastic. Thank you for giving me so much of your time. Are you able to tell our audience where they can find you and all the great work that you do? And I will begin with Sam here, please.
It says on screen at Scooper Hoops, as Dan said. That's me on Twitter. You did not see us on video because we are part of the witness protection program because of all of the Kevin Durant stands. So if you work in the Houston media, good luck. They're coming for you next. And otherwise, what other good work do we do? I don't think we do anything. We just talk about the Suns multiple times a week. Come check us out.
Yeah, it's called The Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. You can find it in all the places that podcasts are heard, or follow on Twitter at ProtectedPick is my name.
One of my favorite podcasts to listen to. The link to it will be in the podcast and YouTube description, as well as to their Patreon. So go check that out. Support these guys. They do great work. Once more, thank you guys so much. And as you know by now, I will be pestering you again down the line.
Thanks, Dan.